Hello, this is Quick Skills, and today I'm going to be giving you a quick start guide to Lorcana. If you're new to trading card games or new to Lorcana in general and are ready to play, this video is for you. This tutorial is designed to get you playing as quickly as possible. Now to do that, you will need a 60 card deck, and when building your deck, you are going to have a few restrictions. The first restriction is the colors that are allowed inside your deck. There are 6 total colors to choose from. We have ruby, sapphire, emerald, amethyst, steel, and amber. When building your deck, you will be able to choose all of one color or include 2 colors when building your deck, but you cannot have 3 or more when picking the cards you want to have in your 60 card deck. So let's just say you wanted to have Aurora and Genie in your deck. You would not be able to choose any of the other colors available to you when building that deck. The other thing I want to point out is that you may see multiple copies of Aurora, but this is Aurora Briar Rose. This is a unique card that you can have 4 Aurora Briar Rose in your deck, and if you find another Aurora that has a different name here, you do not have that limitation. You can include another 4 copies of that different Aurora. So you will have a limitation of 4 copies of any particular card and limited to 2 colors when building your deck. I have built a deck and I chose Amethyst and Amber for this tutorial, and now we have a 60 card deck that has no more than 4 copies of a single card and 2 colors, Amber and Amethyst. Now let's assume that your opponent has already their deck ready to go. The first thing you're going to want to do is determine who goes first. To do that, you can flip a coin or just decide mutually. Normally you're going to play best 2 out of 3 with the loser playing first on the next round or the next game. So now let's just assume that we are going first. Let's go ahead and draw our opening hand. That is going to be 7 cards. So here we have 7 cards. As you play your deck, you're going to notice that there are some cards that you want in your hand more often than others, and you may not want to have them in your opening hand. So let's just say I did not want to have this Sebastian or Olaf in my opening hand. I am able to mulligan my opening hand. You can take any number of cards that you like, place them face down in front of you, draw 2 additional cards if that's how many you put down in front of you, and place those cards at the bottom of your deck. You're only allowed to do this once per game. Once you have done that, you're going to want to take a look at your opening hand, and the first thing you're going to want to do is place a card in your inkwell. Unless a card states otherwise, you will be limited to placing only 1 card into your inkwell per turn, and ink is what we use to play our cards. So let's just grab a card here. We're going to grab this Maximus, and we're going to show it to our opponent to show that it is inkable, and we're going to place it face down in front of us just like that. The one thing I want to point out is how to determine if a card is inkable or not. So here we have a Hades and here we have a Maximus. This Maximus is highlighted with this circle around the number. It's a very bold looking circle there. The Hades looks a little empty. It's just the hexagon. So what that means is Maximus can be inked. So that is why you're going to show your opponent the card and show them that it is inkable. If we look at this hand, every card in this hand besides Hades is inkable. Now that I have placed my card down, I can use this ink by turning it sideways and choosing a card that has the number 1 on the top. And luckily, we have a stitch here. It has a 1, and we're going to place it down in front of us. So now we have 3 of the 4 zones active. We have our deck, we have cards in play, we have cards in our inkwell, and when we discard a card or banish a card, it's going to go into our discard pile. Now, when you play a character card, it will be wet, meaning the ink is still drying. All that simply means is any abilities printed on the card that require it to turn sideways, which we call exhausting the card, cannot be done until the ink is dry. The other thing is that your character is able to go on quest. Again, that's going to require it to turn sideways. You're not going to be able to do that until your ink is dry. Luckily, the next turn, at the start of your turn, all creatures in play will be dry. So now we are done with our turn. We're going to pass it on to our opponent. And for the sake of this tutorial, let's just say that our opponent placed an ink into their inkwell, and they placed a Sergeant Tibbs. One other thing I want to point out is that on your opening turn, you will not draw a card. However, your opponent will draw a card on their opening turn. So they'll start with 8 cards in hand. You're going to start with 7 if you go first. Now, your opponent is done with your turn. You are now going to take your second turn. The first thing you're going to do is unexhaust any cards. So any cards that are sideways, you're going to turn them vertical to show that they're ready to be used again. And you're going to draw a card and place it into your hand. Now, just like last turn, we're going to have the option of placing a card into our inkwell. So we're going to do that again. And now we want to play another card. We're going to choose this LeFou. Now, LeFou has a special ability printed on it. It says, if you have a character named Gaston in play, you may pay 1 less ink to play this character. Unfortunately, I do not have a Gaston, so I am playing the 2 ink to play my LeFou. Now, at this point of the game, I do want to point out some characteristics to your cards when understanding what to do next. We're going to take a closer look at this stitch, and we're going to see here that it has a 2 on the left side of the numbers. That is called the strength. And on the right side, we have the willpower. So when challenging a character, this stitch is going to be able to use 2 strength against someone else's willpower, and will be able to have 2 willpower against an opponent's strength. To challenge a character, the opponent will need to have a character that is exhausted, so turn sideways. Because they just played their Sergeant Tibbs, we will not have the option to challenge on our second turn this game. You will see here that there is this diamond printed here at the bottom. This is a lore counter, and when we decide that we want a quest, we are going to increase our lore count. Now, Disney has a great app that will track it on your phone. Also included with the starter decks is this play mat here, and it has a counter going from 0 to 20. So at the end of my turn, or as soon as I quest with this stitch, my lore will go from 0 to 1. The first player to get to 20 or more at any point in the game wins the game. Now, that is the basic mechanics of this game, and what we're going to do is we're going to show you another core mechanic called challenging. So now I have quested with my stitch, and I am done with my turn. Now, what's important about this is that you do not have to play these in any particular order. You may decide to quest first, then play your ink, then play your LeFou. But what is important is the timing of how you play these cards, because there will be certain cards that specifically interact with damaged cards or cards that are in play. So we want to make sure that we play them when it is advantageous to us. So now we're going to end our turn and allow our opponent to take their turn. So at the start of their turn, they decide they want to challenge Stitch. And to do that, all they're going to do is turn their card sideways and announce that Sergeant Tibbs is challenging Stitch. If we look at this Sergeant Tibbs and compare it side by side with the Stitch, we will see that his Sergeant Tibbs 2 strength is equal to the number on Stitch, which is 2. And vice versa, Stitch strength is equal to the willpower here. What that's effectively going to do is Stitch is going to challenge Sergeant Tibbs for 2, reducing this 2 over here to 0, and Sergeant Tibbs' 2 is going to reduce this Stitch to 0. Both cards will be banished as a result of that challenge. The advantage for our opponent is now Stitch is not available to us to quest. You'll also notice that their Sergeant Tibbs had the ability to quest for 1 lore, but because they challenged, that card is no longer able to be challenged. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that sometimes you'll have characters that have greater power than the character that's being challenged. So here we have a Stitch that is being challenged by a Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell has 3 power and 3 strength and 3 willpower. So the 3 is going to be greater than Stitch's 2 willpower. So Stitch is going to be gone. But this Tinkerbell is going to take 2 permanent damage from Stitch. So this Tinkerbell now has 1 willpower versus 3 willpower. This will be important because let's just say our opponent took that turn and now it is our turn. We're going to repeat by drawing a card, unexhausting all of our cards, and getting ready to take our 3rd turn. So again, we are going to play our ink for turn. And now we have some interesting options here. We can play a Mickey. Mickey is going to basically come out with 3 strength and 3 willpower and 2 lore, or we can play our Maximus. Maximus has an ability that says, when you play this character, chosen character gets -2 strength until end of turn. We know this because it has this little circle here, and it matches the circle that you see here on Tinkerbell. So we're going to put these counters back on. And now we are going to play our Maximus. And as a result, we are going to choose Tinkerbell to have 1 strength versus 3. 2 minus 3 is 1, or 3 minus 2 is 1. So now, when we challenge our LeFou on Tinkerbell, it's going to deal 1 damage to LeFou. Let's put a counter on him. And LeFou is going to deal 1 damage to Tinkerbell. Now that Tinkerbell has 3 counters on it, Tinkerbell's damage matches the willpower and is now banished. This is where timing is very important, because if I have this Maximus in my hand and I instead decide to challenge Tinkerbell with this LeFou, if I have yet to play my Maximus, her power would still be 3, her strength would still be 3, removing my LeFou because my LeFou only has 2 willpower. So timing of when you play your cards is critical in a game like this. Now the gameplay will continue back and forth until you have reached the 20 counters, the 20 lore counters to win the game.